Remember that feeling? The pure joy of booting up your favorite game, a world waiting to be explored, a challenge ready to be conquered. But what happens when that spark fades? When the sequels stumble, the magic dwindles, and the franchise you once loved starts to feel, well, worse. Even the greatest video game series have their moments when they should be ended. All of the game franchises on this list are completely bereft of creativity and worth at this time. Whether it's because the publishers simply don't care anymore, the developers have lost all creative integrity, or there's some nasty corporate combo of the two. The franchise has gone on for at least one installment, which is too long if it has made it this far. However, this does not imply that these franchises are unworthy. Some contributed to the creation of whole genres, while others preserved them. In fact, some of the greatest games of the last several generations may be found in 2 or 3 of these series. Unquestionably, the gold medals of gaming achievement. However, when publishers and developers become avaricious and produce a ton of games for short profit margins, even the titans will crumble. We will start with Assassin's Creed. When did it begin? What took place? What went wrong so badly? If not the most popular new IP from the 7th generation of video games, Assassin's Creed was undoubtedly the most promising. Every year the game sells millions of copies, and is always trying to push the boundaries in new directions. Regrettably, Ubisoft was forced to release the series on a yearly basis, which has led to progressively worse releases every year. For some players, Assassin's Creed Unity marked a turning point, and they vowed never to play the franchise again. Assassin's Creed is almost worse than Call of Duty right now due to its complicated plot, gimmicky gameplay, and passing schema that ultimately became monotonous. At least with Call of Duty, they have been attempting to innovate. Up next, we have Duke Nukem Consider, the original Duke Nukem, to be a little more capable than Commander Keen. It was not a very nice game. The gameplay was mediocre, and the graphics were very bad. But Duke Nukem 2 was a vast improvement over the original, and Duke Nukem 3D revolutionized the franchise. In contrast to Assassin's Creed 3D Realms, Duke Nukem Forever was developed too slowly, and ultimately went into development hell. There were a number of spin-off games prior to the release of Forever, but none of them could match Duke Nukem 3D's quality. Despite Gearbox's best efforts to keep the license, they were unable to improve old Duke's lot in life, and as a result, the series continues to be overlooked despite its promise. Now let's discuss Flatout. Following the demise of Destruction Derby, Bugbear Entertainment's Flatout seemed to be a fantastic addition to the derby racing scene. It included some absurd ragdoll mini-games that kept players captivated for hours on end, and it had stiff bodily deformation that was unlike anything else in a game, either in scope or quality. In comparison to the original, Flatout 2 seems to both improve the idea and stall the gameplay, almost as if the first had already been played out before it even got started. There wasn't much left to do when the third Flatout game came out, and deformable automobiles had lost their appeal. Even after numerous poorly received spin-offs for the game, Bugbear finally moved their skills to the independent racing industry, abandoning their cherished IP in the dust. Next, we have Resident Evil. Resident Evil is one of the few game series on our list that will make you shake your head the most. Although there has always been a lot of potential for this series, it has been abused to the point that the direction and quality have practically declined with time. Following the incredible success of the first 3 Resident Evil games and the series' reinvention with Resident Evil 4, the series started to deteriorate considerably. The stories become increasingly complicated and humorous, with a greater emphasis on action than on survival and terror. Additionally, Capcom began releasing an increasing number of spin-offs, which, over time, did little more than diminish the series' worth. At this point, the only thing gamers want out of Resident Evil is a remake of the second game. Next, we will discuss Quake. Quake's ascent to stardom was likewise peculiar. From the character models to the weaponry to the special effects to the levels, it was among the very first-person shooters to be fully rendered in 3 dimensions. In the player perspective, there are no hand-drawn weaponry or 1D sprites. As a brand, Quake established a bar that was too high to meet. For the science fiction puzzle and stone shooter, it was an odd turn of events. Eventually, Quake entered the multiplayer arena, where Quake 3, Arena and Quake Live helped it become most well-known. However, when ID Software produced Quake 4, it attempted to return to the storylines that were first presented in Quake 2. However, Quake's identity was always a challenge, and it struggled to find its own identity again. It was a 3D mashup of Doom and Hexen, neither quite Doom nor Hexen, but it was famous for being one of the first 3D first-person shooters and for inventing multiplayer rocket jumping. Next, we will talk about Perfect Dark on the N64. Rare really struck gold with Perfect Dark. Even though the game's visuals weren't the best at the time, it truly gained its stride when it combined novel first-person gameplay elements that no other game was using, such as stealth, taking out adversaries with melee strikes, and disarming opponents without killing them. Although the initial game broke new ground, the series entered a rough patch once Perfect Dark Zero, the Xbox 360 launch title, came out. It was a prequel meant to provide a great deal of background on Joanna Dark's life before she joined the agency, but it was completely disorganized. The game lost its cyber-noir edge for a goofy, bright world instead, and the series has never gotten back on track since. Turok is next on our list. This is a video game series that began off with a lot of promise but quickly lost steam following the release of the second game. One of the few series that exposed gamers to a simple HUD and first-person platforming was Turok. Not to mention, back when the franchise was still in its early stages, it had some really amazing dinosaur battles and fantastic visuals. The series lost all of its appeal with the third game, which murdered Turok, the protagonist, at the beginning of the game. A relaunch effort was made in an attempt to breathe new life into the series, but it failed miserably in its attempt to capitalize on the 7th generation's prevailing gritty and dark motif. It's safe to say that the reboot didn't go well, and Turok remains a franchise fossil. Lastly, we will talk about Lost Planet. Capcom's Lost Planet was such a great idea. Third-person shooter game innovation was greatly aided by the initial game. In this survival game, players had to battle enormous beasts and endure the bitter cold. It was excellent. Though contentious, the sequel was nonetheless praised for being an enjoyable game, since it placed more of an emphasis on character customization and even larger creatures. With Lost Planet 3, Capcom went entirely in a different direction, doing away with the extensive weaponry and all of the customization options from the previous game. The many mechs and combat suits from the second game were also removed. What we ended up with was a pared-down third-person shooter that relied on a ho-hum story and uninteresting combat. Lost Planet has been lost and dormant ever since. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the content and found it both informative and entertaining. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting videos like this.